So Christine Simon, I think you have members of your family here, but Christine grew up in a very large and very loud Italian family, and now lives with her husband and 4 children in Cedar Grove. And The Patron Saint of Second Chances is her first novel. And we have the extreme pleasure tonight of having a conversation with Dr. Gina Miele. She is the assistant professor of Italian and former director of the Kocha Institute for Italian Experience in America up at MSU. And she specializes in 19th and 20th century Italian folk tales. And she's the perfect partner, I think, for our discussion this evening. But let's all welcome Christine and Gina tonight.
So this is really, it's a pleasure for me, and it's so interesting how my work seems, we've been talking about signs, and in the book there are all these references to signs, and it's interesting how your book and what I researched do kind of dovetail.
Yeah.
And for me, it's such a pleasure in reading this book because I'm Italian American, as you can imagine, and have roots in Southern Italy. My family's from Southern Italy, and this book has resonated with me personally, and also I see so many themes that we'll talk about and questions that came up as I was reading about inspiration. And so where was her inspiration for some of the characters or the town that was at the heart of the book? And for this cult, what I mentioned to you as the cult of folk Catholicism and the love of the saints, which is part of the title. So I have a lot of questions, and I'm going to try to limit myself. But I wanted to start, if you could maybe tell everybody the premise of the story and where the initial inspiration came from.
Okay. Well, the initial idea came from stories that I kept seeing on the news about houses in Italy that you could buy for $1. And they're all coming from these tiny little towns where the people are leaving, the young people especially are going to the big cities. And so you have towns that have been there since the Middle Ages that now everyone is leaving. So in these stories, usually there's a mayor, some enterprising mayor, who wants to drum up some publicity and get people to come so that the town doesn't die. So a lot of them have tried selling homes for $1. There was one town I saw that the mayor had the idea to make it illegal to die. So of course, who wouldn't want to live somewhere where you're not allowed to do that? So that's where the idea came from, and it was such a great idea because it gave me so many pieces of what I needed to get started. It gave me the setting, which would be a tiny Italian town. It gave me the main character, which would be the mayor, and it gave me what he wanted to do, which would be to save his town. So,
and we talked about how it seems almost far-fetched.
Yes.
If you don't know about those stories of so many of these Italian towns, this is actually happening in Italy. So it's not far-fetched that these towns are grasping at straws to find ways to bring people in to reinvigorate the towns. And it's really actually a very sad story. But it's working. People are buying these homes for $1, spending thousands upon thousands to renovate them. But when I read the book, when I started reading, I immediately thought of that.
Yeah.
These towns. But isn't there also an inspiration from your own family for the town itself in the book?
Yes. My mother's family is from a tiny town that is the direct inspiration for Prometto in the book, called Verrazzano, which is in Calabria. And it's a very interesting place. I think they have around 800 people now.
So a little more than the town in the book.
Yes. But they had an earthquake in 1907 that damaged a lot of the houses that had been there forever. And instead of repairing them, it was a medieval town, so the houses were at the top of the mountain. And so instead of repairing them, they just moved down a layer. And so the old houses are still there. And if you go on Google Maps and you type in Verrazzano, it'll come up. And if you look at if you click on like the little picture at the bottom, you can kind of walk around town. You can follow the little arrows. And you'll see these old houses with like moss growing over the stairs, and you can see like trees growing inside the building and like poking out the windows. So some of the main character is very wistful about the past, and he would like to return to the past, which is part of his problem because he's neglecting the future. But that kind of informed his wistfulness. Like he could go visit the past anytime he wants. It's like Pompeii without the volcano. He can go and visit all these houses where his great grandparents lived, and everything's still there. So that was the town that I was thinking of, and Signor Speranza is one of the people who stayed. And my sister and I have always speculated, like, wouldn't it have been so strange if our grandparents hadn't left? If we, we wouldn't exist, obviously, but what if we still lived there? And so I think that was also part of the inspiration is like, okay, I'm gonna go visit and see what it would be like if we lived there.
I think a lot of certainly immigrants from many cultural backgrounds, but Italian Americans, there is, I can say this because I'm a professor of Italian, and so many of my students, they are from Italian American families, and they are desperate to reconnect to their Italian roots, and so they take the language first and try to reconnect to the culture, and then maybe eventually go back to Italy and visit the town where their families come from. So I think that the experience is one that many of us who were born in the United States, a generation or two removed from the people that came.
Yes.
They don't always want to go back, but we feel a desperate desire to reclaim. And so I love that you were able to use a novel as a way for you to visit and to set some roots down in that place. I wanted to ask you too about because the title is mentioned saints.
Yes.
Many of us can talk about experiences we've had growing up with what I call folk Catholicism, where we are devoted to particular saints. I, to this day, wear saint medals, daily. We tend to bury Saint Joseph in the front yard. You might have heard that, or the Malocchio. We believe in the Malocchio, and how do you? And you might laugh at it, but I think it's superstitious. But we continue to do some of these things. And so, I wanted to know from your own background. You're from an Italian American family. How much of this, Signor Speranza's thinking about a compendium of saints, and he references them, and because he's so, he's a little antiquated. He doesn't know how to work a cell phone, right? And he's threatened by the future, and so because of that, I was imagining him with like a Rolodex. If you remember the Rolodex, I was thinking, okay, well, which saint do I need right now? And searching through his mind, but every saint that he mentioned, I understood and I could relate to. So how much of that came from research, and how much of it came from your own personal background growing up?
Well, it definitely came from both, because I did find a comprehensive dictionary of patron saints, and I love it so much because there's so many wild ones, and my favorite is Saint Barbara, who's the patron saint of death by cannonball. That's my favorite.
Just in case anyone.
And then Signor Speranza feels like she's probably not that busy anymore, so like maybe she could help him out because she doesn't have anything else to do. But he kind of uses this book as like a phone book, like he's very transactional. Like, okay, I need this, so like let me see who I need to call. And the priest, the village priest, who kind of is trying to be like, okay, but that's not how things work. He's like, of course that's how it works. Like I tried it and it worked, and I asked this person for something, and they helped me. So my mother, who is here, she is devoted to many different saints, and if we lose something, ask Saint Anthony. He probably has he has eternity, so he can help you find it. And she'll send her guardian angel to do things for her, like find parking spaces, go ahead and find the parking. And this also seems to work, so part of me is like, okay, is this superstition? But then it's like, well, no, she just believes, like she has this faith that I can ask and you shall receive. Like, so that's how Signor Speranza operates. Like, if I find the right person who's going to go and talk to Our Lady for me, like I'm going to ask my father, like you're up there. If you're not doing anything this afternoon, if you'd go talk to Jesus and like work this out, I would appreciate it. So
you grew up steeped in that.
Yes.
And as did I. And we've said that sometimes you laugh at it, right? And so I loved it in your book. There's so much humor, and yet what I said to you is that as funny as some of the dialogue is, and you write dialogue so well, it really just felt like I was standing there in the conversation. But you also lend an air of respect to that. You're not making fun of these traditions and these ideas that might seem a little antiquated. Even your main character, as funny as he is, and the stories that you tell about him, there is still this air of you understand him. You understand his motivations, specifically his relationship with his daughter. We talked about that has some challenges in it, and the lengths that he goes to, because that's what an Italian father would do. It would be very difficult for an Italian father to have his daughter move away or to
Right.
have a challenging relationship with a child. So I really think you render him with authenticity, and I appreciated that
Right.
you didn't make fun of some of the
Yes.
quirks that he has.
He is ridiculous,
Yes.
but his heart is pure.
Yes. Yes.
You know, and I don't know if we talked about this, but his name, I got his name, which is Giovannino Speranza. His last name means hope. But Giovannino, I got from the Italian author Giovannino Guareschi, who wrote the Don Camillo stories, and which were very big in Italy. I don't know how many Americans have read them, but his given name is Giovannino, which is of course the diminutive form of Giovanni. So his parents, looking at this baby, could not imagine him ever being an adult, and so they named him Giovannino, and that's where Signor Speranza's whole character kind of came from that. That he's very impetuous, he's very impulsive, he's childishly stubborn, and so that was kind of how, when I wanted him to do these ridiculous things and make these ridiculous, nonsensical decisions, he had to be the type of person who would do that. So that's kind of where that came from, that his parents saw him always as their little Giovannino.
Now his foil is the butcher in the town,
Yes.
who has many sons, right? So
Right.
that Signor Speranza, who has one daughter and now one granddaughter, so and his wife and an uncle, an elderly uncle. But then the character with whom he struggles frequently is a father of many boys. How did you come up with that character, and what is the motivation for that character's story?
Right.
Next to
In
Signor
in another story that I'd written a while ago that had Signor Speranza in it that didn't end up panning out, he discovers that his name is spelled wrong. Like it was a clerical error sometime in history, and so he is the only person, the only man other than his elderly uncle remaining in the world who has this last name. So he's thinking like, I'm going to go extinct, like my line is going extinct. So that he has a daughter and he has a granddaughter.
Tragedy for
an Italian man.
Italian man.
So his nemesis is the butcher, who has 15 sons who all look just like him. So it's like they could repopulate the earth if they had to. So that also is kind of like a very Italian idea. Like they love all the children, but you've got a son. Like this is very exciting. So that was an idea that came from an earlier draft, but I liked it enough to keep it. And I love the butcher so much, and I love all of his sons. And so then when his daughter kind of expresses some interest in one of the butcher's sons, this is terrifying, because then not only is his, he's going to be taken over by the maestros. So I love their rivalry.
Yes. And even the way he operates as the mayor, and it's in his vacuum shop.
Yes.
Right, so it's not just this. If you've been to Southern Italy and you've been to some of these very small towns, and he knows every shop in town, he can tell you the history of who owned that shop and for how many generations, right? And his shop was his father's shop, and
Yes.
so that to me also just rang so true, because the towns that I've been to, these are teeny little towns, and people stayed for so many years,
Right.
generation after generation, and that's why it's such a tragedy.
Yes.
When now, because of so many reasons, people are moving out.
Right.
There's a history. Like you said, even if they have to move down a terrace because
Yes.
of an earthquake, well, then they'll just move down, but they're not leaving.
Right.
Right? And so this idea that now people have to leave, it's very sad to watch. And speaking of sad things, in Italy, I know you said you started writing this book at the beginning of pandemic, and we talked about, or at least the version that is now the published version. And like you, I watched video of Italy before COVID was in the United States. I was watching, my eyes were on Italy. I had family in Italy like you. And it was really upsetting to see, this is our home, this is a land that we love, and to see the people suffering, but then also on their balconies and singing. And it was a beautiful, beautiful moment for me.
Right.
And it made me desperate to get back there. I wanted to get back, and I started planning as soon as I could get back. This is how I do it. And you, instead, what was the way that you got to Italy and channeled Italy in the early days of the pandemic? You wrote this book. So what was that experience like, being on lockdown?
Well, it was, in one way, I didn't have to go pick my kids up from school. So it was, I had like uninterrupted time, which was helpful. But I remember when I started, it was just after that had happened in Italy, and it was like a preview of what was coming.
Yes.
And it was terrifying. Like, you know, when you think about it now, it was like watching the angel of death come, and that they were out on the balcony singing. That was so beautiful. And I think that it made, you know, it gave everybody like a little shot of courage, because, you know, we knew it was coming. And it was so nice every day to be able to escape somewhere where there was no pandemic. So, like, you know, if I was writing for 6 hours, I would like look up and be like, oh, I'm
I have to
back.
come back to reality.
Oh no. And it was so nice that, okay, well, I'm going back tomorrow. That's fine. And so it was so nice to know that this was going to have a happy ending, that was really like a sustaining thing, that as bad as it got, it was going to be okay. And one of the things that I gave him was this constant worry about money, that it's constantly swirling in his mind. Like, you know, he's doing these competitions, and of course, he can't even let go of the Italian lira. So even though he's obliged now to deal in euros, he still translates it in his mind to lira, which is the Italian money. You know, I mean, like, you work today, here's 1,000,000 lira. Like, it's like, yes, I worked very hard. It's like, that's satisfying. Like, you know, here's 80 euros. Well, all right, why did I even come?
Exactly.
So he still makes the translation every, you know, and so the money is even more staggering when he translates it into lira. It's like, how could I ever get this much money to fix the pipes? And that's something that, you know, I felt like that before. Like, oh my gosh, like, okay, let me, like, I have to move this money here, and then I'm going to wait for this money, you know. So that was something that I was like, this is going to work out for you. And it was satisfying to be able to be like, I can make you so worried, and I know that it's going to work out.
Yes. And I felt, you're saying you felt transported in writing it, and I definitely feel transported in reading it.
Right.
But it's a book that makes you feel good, and even though there are moments that are tense in the book, and there is obviously something that has to be resolved, it is still a book that it's a fun read. It's when you write. I've said to you that I think this book, I see it as a movie as I'm reading it,
Right.
and I think it would make a fantastic movie. You write dialogue, like I said,
My
so
mother
well.
also thinks that.
Your writing is very cinematic. So
Right.
how do you write? What is your process? Because it does feel like it could easily transfer to the screen without too much work. So
Right.
what?
I agree with you.
Right?
Well, when I first started trying to write novels, it's been a very long time. I've been, you know, writing since my son was born. He's almost 15. So first I was reading like how to write a novel books, and I found them to be really frustrating and demoralizing, because they all seem to suggest that there's some magical component, and that, you know, you might have to have been born to do this. And it was like, well, okay, well, maybe I don't have any of that. And then when I found screenwriting books, it was like, this is a job. Like, you know, roll your sleeves up, and you need to do this, and this is where this act break should be, and this is how many scenes you're probably going to need. And that was like really freeing and exciting. And once I found that, like this book is, I was influenced by Save the Cat, Goes to the Movies. This is a golden fleece story, which is when someone is trying to win a great prize. So it can be like the Bad News Bears are trying to win a game, or it could be like the movie Big Night, where they're trying to save their restaurant, or it could be, you know, the Full Monty, where he wants to earn enough money in an unconventional way to, you know, be able to still continue paying child support and see his son. So it gave kind of like a guideline of like, well, these are the types of things that happen in that type of story. And that was so helpful, because plot was something that I had struggled with for such a long time. And it was like, well, here's kind of a roadmap. And it's like, why do I have to invent a roadmap? Everyone's using this one. So that was very helpful.
It works.
Yeah, it works. Yeah.
What is your? I know it's what is it? You're a pantser or a
Planner.
planner.
Yes.
My question is this: when
Yes.
you came up with this book, I know you said that you had this idea because of the town, and you had some ideas about it. But
Right.
Did you think through this entire story before
No.
you sat down to put it on paper, or did you work through it as you went?
I made myself, before I started, so that I knew I could finish it, I made myself write one very vague paragraph per act, and I had 4 acts. And so it was like, okay, in the first act, things are bad, and the pipes are broken, and he needs to find some money, and he doesn't know what to do, and he's going to get this idea that he's going to start a rumor that a movie star is gonna film.
That theory analogy, which I love the name that you picked for the movie.
Yes.
So.
And so then that was Act One, and it was like I didn't need to have. And then once I was ready to write Act One, then I would try to find 10 scenes that I know I need to have to make those things that are in my paragraph happen. And so then I would do that. If I had tried to do 10 scenes per act at the beginning, I think I would have quit. So it was like once I got to the end of Act One, then I would take a day off and I would read my paragraph. Okay, this is when he's gonna try to get investors and he's gonna hold auditions and he's going to have. I knew I wanted a scene with stunt doubles. We were trying to find a stunt double, and by the midpoint, he's going to decide he's really gonna make the movie for real. And then I would find my 10 scenes, and then I would do that. So I knew vaguely what was going to happen in each act, but not until the day before I started it did I find my 10 scenes.
I see. Your title, I wanted to tell you that the chapters of your time, I'm going to read it for you if you don't mind, because you have great titles for your chapters. Tree stumps have feelings too.
Yeah.
I was stopping at each chapter and I would just sit with the title for a few minutes because How to Run Like a Movie Star, and that was a great scene as well. But I really found them, they made me laugh, and Into the Lion's Den, and also these little great images in the beginning of each. But the titles, I just wanted to tell you that I appreciated
I'm so
the thought
glad.
that went into the titles. We were talking earlier about when you were writing that some of your family, people from your own family have populated the book in different ways, to the two older women,
Yes.
where they come from. So can you say, we talked about Senor Speranza and what his background was and where you got that inspiration. Can we talk about some of the other characters and
Sure.
if they come from real life or are
Yes.
inspired by?
Well, the two old ladies who I love, they're very silly, and they wander around town. They're always showing up in strange places. But it's Senora Padula and Senora Barbaro. And my grandfather, when he was born, his mother died when he was 2 weeks old. And so his mother's sister ended up, helping to take care of the kids. And then after a few years, she married my grandfather's father. So it was two sisters, married to the same man. And so in the book,
Which sounds
it sounds weird,
crazy, but these things
yes.
happen.
So in the book, I have them both live to old age, and they're always together.
And they add a lot of comic relief in some of the scenes, right? One of the things, they show up in the audition scenes, right? So they audition
Right.
in a hilarious way for like a love scene, right?
Right. Yes.
So
They're very old.
they're very, very old.
They're like 90.
It was one of my favorite scenes. But the auditions, when he's trying to find characters for this fictitious film, the Tanti Rinaldi, immediately I was thinking of Italian neorealism, which is obviously not at all that same kind of film. These very sad, depressing films. But what was interesting about them is that very frequently the directors would get non-professional actors from the towns where they were filming because they wanted to have authentic feelings coming from these characters.
Right.
And so I wanted, because there's so much, as I said, cinematic, a feel of cinema to your book. Are there films that have inspired you? And then also as a follow-up, what books have inspired you in the writing of this novel, but just in general, in your life, what books, what authors,
Right.
what films have had influence on you?
The movies that I was inspired very specifically were Big Night, in which it's two immigrant Italian brothers who were trying to save their restaurant, and that was when I had like a breakthrough on exactly what I was going to do. It's like, okay, they are trying to save their restaurant, so they come up with this unconventional way. They're gonna have Louis Prima's gonna come and they're gonna cook a big dinner and get lots of publicity. I was like, okay, so he's trying to save his town. What ridiculous thing could he do? And then I had the idea of, okay, a movie star's coming and we're gonna make a movie. And then all the other movies were The Full Monty and Waking Ned Divine. And Waking Ned Divine takes place in a tiny Irish village. I think they only have 57 people. It's like even tinier than my village. Yeah, and somebody in the village wins the lottery and immediately dies. So they're like, we won the lottery. Everyone won the lottery. And so it becomes, all these underdogs in this tiny town who are going to come together and do something spectacular. And I love those kind of stories. I love tiny towns where everybody knows everybody and is in everybody's business.
Right.
And then I love an underdog story. And that's one of the themes that comes up again and again. Like at one point, he's lying, of course, but he says that, they're going to build a movie theater. That's what the money is for that he's gotten from Senor Maestro. They're going to build a movie theater. And his assistant starts crying because he didn't know they were allowed to have a movie theater because, we're from nowhere. Like, we can't do anything. We can't have anything. And so that was one of the things that it runs kind of as a thread through the book. Is like, why can't we have a movie theater? Or why couldn't we make a movie that's good enough that someone would want to watch it? Or, why can't we, the one guy wants to sing, well, why can't he? He has a beautiful voice.
Yes, the voice of an angel.
Right, the voice of an angel. Yeah. One of the maestro's sons.
Yes, one of the many.
Yes.
Is that Ernesto that has the
That's
wonderful
Ernesto.
voice? But he can't do anything else. He's another character that the audition scene with him was really.
Well, the stunt double scene is actually inspired by my daughter Emily.
Okay.
Because she can run so fast, and when she was little, she would like just booking it. Like, she was a really fast crawler. Like, if you turn your back, she's gone.
She's gone.
So we would see it, like, we'd take her to the park, and she'd be running so fast, and I was like, my husband and I would talk about it, like, this is like Tom Cruise. Like, Tom Cruise, it's like they don't need special effects. They just have him run down, Times Square, and you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. So we're like, maybe we could teach her to do this, and like we could be like, you have to go like this, and you have to keep looking over your shoulder. And I was like, she's gonna run into a tree if we teach her to do that. And so that's where that scene came from, with Ernesto trying to be a stunt double and run like Tom Cruise. Emily.
What about books? What are the authors and books throughout your life? I know you said very early you went to be a writer. So
yes.
What are the books that have followed you?
Well, Beverly Cleary I loved so much when I was little, and then I found out that the 12th, when the book came out, was Beverly Cleary's birthday, and I was so happy. And it was one of those signs that we were talking about. And then the one that has recently inspired me, and especially with Small Village Life, is Alexander McCall Smith and the #1 Movies Detective Agency. And again, it's like these very humble people who it's like, this is the world, and this is this very small and closed world, but they have the same problems that the whole world has. It's, that they're from a humble place, but non-remote sway believes like we're just as good as people from anywhere.
Yes.
And that was one of the things that
Well,
it's also very funny.
You're saying community. It's the second time you've mentioned community, and I think
Right.
that comes through in your book very much. That you said everyone knows each other, and that can be coming from a town in Italy where everyone knows each other.
Right.
That can be annoying,
Yes.
right? But there is when trouble comes, they do all pull together, and they do all support one another because they know your great grandparents, and they know everyone has. They've got money on this ticket, right?
Yeah.
So you have to stay this town together. And what I loved about the mayor, about Senor Speranza, is that he's so unselfish. He wants to save his town because he lives there and he has
Right.
a child, but really he's doing it for everybody. He's going to these extreme lengths
Yeah.
for everybody else, and they have no idea that's why he's doing it.
Right.
It's really an unselfish act
Yeah.
for the town and the people that he loves and that he's known all these years.
Well, that was one of the problems that I had when I started, and that sometimes you put something in an outline and it's like, oh, it's perfect, it's ready.
Mhm.
And then when you start writing it, you're like, oh, I have a problem. And it was like, here's this religious man, and it's like, you are lying to everybody,
Including the priest.
including the priest who he tries to avoid.
Right.
And it's like it was a problem.
Mhm.
So it's like I realized I had to keep visiting his sense of guilt.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it was like, okay, and also in a book where you're so close to the characters,
Mhm.
you have to really be on their side. Like in a movie, if George Clooney's playing the guy, like I don't care what he's doing. Like he's George Clooney, like he's so charming. Like okay, you can rob a bank, that's fine. But in a book, like you have to be on side, and that was something that I had to keep coming back to. Like he has to be guilty. He has to be dodging the priest. He has to be, praying like, God, I know that I shouldn't be doing this, but I'm doing it for a really good reason.
Yes. And he had like a direct line.
Yes, he just speaks
direct line
directly
to
when
God,
he needs to.
or if he has been to see with the saints, he'll do that.
Yes.
And it's funny because the priest does keep coming and trying to appeal to his honesty and his sense of what is right and wrong. And he has to kind of turn off the priest and tell himself, I'm doing this for the good of my people. So he'll say to the saints, you'll understand, you know why I'm doing this, right?
You can explain this.
Yes. When everything works out in the end, that is the reason why.
Right.
What's next for you? What are you thinking about after this? I know this is going to take up a great deal of time now, but are you already thinking ahead to
Yes, I
future book?
love comedy, and I love small town antics.
Okay.
So that's where where I'm going next. So
Will you stay in Italy or will you travel elsewhere?
I think I might travel around, but if I ever came back to them, I mean, I would visit them anytime. So I would absolutely write about them again because I love them so much.
Now, how many of your family have actually gone back to visit the town where you're?
My
Your
mother
grandparents.
went when she was, I can't remember, when's the last time we went?
The last time I was 17 years old.
17, so it's been a long time.
You still,
Not too long, Mom.
you must go back now. You have to go back and visit
Yeah.
now after this book has come out. I wonder if anyone there would recognize if they would recognize themselves in the
Well,
town.
yeah, I don't know, maybe.
It's something that would I think any Southern Italian town would recognize itself. in
This is
book.
me, this
Yeah.
is me. I'm the hero of this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You said you're down in the toe of Italy, right? So,
Yes.
and on the water. So this is a
Yeah.
coastal town in Italy. When we talked about the premise of Dante Rinaldi, this famous person coming to film in this town, and that would draw people, right?
Right.
And we said even that, not too far fetched, because when George Clooney, who's
Yeah.
mentioned, when he bought a house in the Lake District of Italy,
Mhm.
that did bring tourism. People
Right.
get on boats to float by. You can't get anywhere near it.
Right.
But the fact that you can get on a boat and they can say, and that is George Clooney's house, and tourists will pay for that, right?
Right,
So this
yeah.
idea, when I read that in your book, I
Yeah.
immediately thought of that.
I know, like all the reviews are like, it's very far fetched. I'm like, this
It's
is
not far.
Right, I have. Yeah. You haven't met my family.
That's exactly right. And I think that for me, the part that's hung the most true is I really feel like these characters could be my family,
Right.
right? And specifically the Italian American, but I think probably others could relate to this as well, because if you have a large family,
Right.
and if you have a community or a small town that feels like the extended family, where the piazza is your living room,
Right.
right? Everyone's crossing in and out. You're not home. You're outside living in the town.
Right.
I think you can relate to these characters and feel like there's someone in your family who's done some of these very
Yeah.
things that may seem far-fetched or ridiculous to somebody else, but to us,
Yeah.
these are
My uncle
everyday
would do that,
occurrences,
yeah.
right? The great uncle is the other character that
Right.
you know, he's a grumpy, grouchy,
Yeah.
kind of wholly unlikable, and you still love
Yes.
him because we all have one like that. right?
Yes.
Is he drawn from any particular?
Yes, he was actually inspired by my husband, who's not Italian, by his grandfather. That when his wife died, he was kind of just like, I'm done here. Like I'm not going to clean this table. Why? I'm not going to cook. Like, he ate out every single night, and it was just like that grouchiness. Like that's what happens with his uncle, is that his wife dies, and then he just checks out.
And he needs something to
He needs something to
occupy
do.
himself
Yeah.
at 93 years old.
Yes.
And Senor Speranza takes care of that too. Like he's
Accidentally.
always
He
thinking,
accidentally takes care of that.
but
Yeah.
he said to himself
Yeah.
like, oh, all right, sure, I'll find you something. But he is always working for others. What about Smirzo, who's his assistant,
Yeah.
who wants to be in cinema and has all these dreams of writing the next great film and has a love interest in town. He's a great character too, because
Yeah.
he's kind of this young version, like a bit of an old man in
Right.
a young form.
He has a very weird origin.
Okay.
When I first started, I had the town sign that says there's 212 people.
Yeah.
I love a town that there literally are 212 people. Like somebody died, we need to go paint it. So in an original draft, I had the town sign, and somebody's leaving, and the sign painter is going to change the sign, and Signor Speranza's like, we can't allow this. And so he and Smilzo go out, and they're gonna like stop him by force.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of Michael and Dwight from The Office. That like Dwight is like this like very vigilant guy who's like kind of like a warrior, but he's like trapped in an office job. So I kind of had that for Smilzo. That Dwight from The Office inspired Smilzo, even though he didn't really turn out so much like Dwight.
Right.
That was his origin.
Okay. So it seems like every character has, nothing was completely a figment of your mind. There's always somebody behind
Right.
the scenes that's giving you at least some part of their character.
Yeah, like something like either a quirk that they have, or like Antonella with the earrings that are always stuck in her hair. Like just something that I could latch onto that I
Her
could
big
picture
old
them.
tooth earring.
Yeah.
So when you walk around in your day, just in your normal life, you know, you have children and you're busy. What are the things that inspire you? What are you noticing that you tuck away?
Well, my sister and I were talking about this the other day, that our family always imitates people, not famous people. Well, my son imitates famous people, but just like our family members. Like no one would. This is not a marketable skill. Like, no one would be interested in hearing like how my Aunt Tracy talks, but we would, we imitate them constantly. And I think that like just having an ear for that is what helps with dialogue. Like this is how this person would talk.
And even, well, you just been mentioning that, it reminded me of, there's an Italian author named Natalia Ginsburg. She wrote this wonderful book called Lessico Familiare, which means family sayings.
Right.
And one of the premises is that if something terrible happened, which we've all lived through such a difficult 2 years, something terrible happened and you got separated from all your people.
Right.
And everybody ended up in a dark, massive cave. You couldn't see anybody. You were spread far and wide, flung about this dark space. And someone called out a family saying, something that nobody else will understand, like that, something one of your aunts would have said in the voice you said.
Right.
Way across the room, that line, that will mean something to someone, and that is how you find your people. And that's how
Right.
you all, in tragedy and darkness, you find your way back to one another from these things. And it's that idea of family and community, right? So
Yeah.
it might not be marketable, but
Yeah.
but it's still a wonderful way to find your way back to it. We keep talking about your roots, and that's how you find your way. Your roots are your people.
Right. Well,
It's
that
place, but it's people.
the part where he keeps up a conversation with his father who died 30 years ago, but they continue chatting. He pictures him as sitting in the back of his mind, and that came from my grandma Babe. That's my father's mother, because we talk in her voice and like imagine what she's saying literally every day, like because she just was such a larger than life character, and so that was where that came from. That he can still talk to him because he knows what he would say.
He knows what he would say. Yeah. Well, I want to give time for other people. I have other questions I could ask, but I certainly want to let everyone here ask any questions if you have any, and then if not, I'm happy to continue.
I wanted to ask you about humor, because I imagine that writing with humor is much different than being funny in person. You don't have like all these like very funny things that you're saying onto paper.
I have a very specific answer for this. There's a book called Writing Television Sitcoms, and again, this goes back to the screenwriting books. Like you can learn from them for real. Like they will tell you how to do it, and they talk about situational humor. It's excellent. It's by Evan Smith. But it's either writing the television sitcom or writing television sitcoms. But he talks about that. A funny line is like, who cares? Like they even hire I think on shows they'll have like the one-liner guy who like this guy's great. Like he'll give us some like ridiculous thing that we can put in the ad on the commercial. But as far as like what's really funny is like the mix of characters. Like if you take, to go back to The Office, if you take Dwight from The Office and you put him together with Jim from The Office in an elevator, it's going to be funny. Like Jim is going to be like, oh no, the elevator's stuck, even though he's like disconnected it or something like that. And Dwight's going to be like, he's the warrior, like I'm going to climb through this hatch. And then Jim's like, oh no, I went too far. He's stuck upstairs. That is what would happen. And it's funny because it's how those characters are interacting. So he talks about that, like the different mix of characters and personalities, and then like the situation itself. Like if I'm trying to think of the situation. Now my mind went blank. But if the situation itself has humor and tension in it, that's funnier than any line you could ever come up with, because you're picturing how like this person is feeling in this situation, and it's funny.
That's it.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Do you ever see yourself moving into a screenwriting sort of role?
I don't know, because like I was always a reader. I love watching movies, but I've never tried writing a movie. And I think that maybe I wouldn't like just writing mostly dialogue. I think that I like also how I can just be like, I literally sit on my bed when I write. Like that's like I'm writing in my pajamas, just sitting on my bed, and I love that. So I know like if I had to like go and work with people, I don't know if I would like that as much.
When you're writing, I know some writers say you have to every morning get up and first thing you do is you sit at your desk and you do 2 hours at your desk. Or do you have a ritual around
I
your
definitely I have to write very, very fast, otherwise I will not finish it.
Okay.
So I have to write 1,500 words a day. So this book, I think the draft that maybe it was 46 days. It was very short. Because it's like I feel like I'm spinning plates, and like if I stop, like everything is gonna come crashing down. So once I start, I have to write 1,500 words a day. It's like that's no matter what. Like it doesn't matter if I can't go to sleep. Like I have to do it. So the most ridiculous thing that happened, I told the story the other day, but the most ridiculous thing that happened when I was writing this book, and it was this was at the end of May, so the hospitals weren't quite as overwhelmed as they've been at the very beginning of COVID, thank God. But I started feeling really, really weird, like in my rib cage felt super weird, and I was like, something is not right. And then it started to hurt when I was to laugh. It started to hurt to laugh. So finally, it was like, okay, I have to go to the hospital. So I went to the ER, and I had paper in my bag, and my phone was dead, which is probably fortunate because then I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna write. And so I got 1,800 words, which is more than my usual total, by hand. And then I had an X-ray, a CAT scan, and an ultrasound. And then the lady comes in and she's like, Christine, it's the weirdest thing. Your abdomen is filling with blood. And I was like, oh, okay. It ended up, I was fine, but that became the new standard of like, you want to work today? Like, oh, you're a little tired? Of course you can work. Yes, you did this. So of course you can get your words done.
Oh my goodness, yes, that's some serious thing.
But that's the bar now.
Although Senor Speranza would be proud that you took pen and paper
Yes.
and you have to use technology
Yes.
to write your book.
I do always write by hand.
Do you write by hand?
Yes.
You don't start on the computer.
I don't start on the computer.
Really?
Yeah, I find it difficult to think on the computer.
Wow. So you write that, and then when you go to put it into the computer, do you revise as you go, or is the draft that you've written?
I do revise some things as I go. I usually have the most revisions in Act 1
Okay.
because maybe I didn't know, like, oh, this doesn't really belong anymore, or something changed along the way. But some stuff, most of it will go in just as I wrote it, and then the revisions with my editor, that's like very intense. Like that's harder, I think, than writing the draft. Yeah.
Were there any surprises for you in this whole? This is your first novel that's been published. So, what were the things that you weren't expecting in this process, from writing to selling the draft, and then through this process now of it coming out?
I wasn't expecting that my agent is in the UK. I wasn't expecting to find my agent, in another country.
Mm-hmm.
And then she worked with someone in the United States, but the book actually sold in the UK first.
Okay.
So it came out there first.
Okay. And there's a different. I saw the cover.
There's a different cover. It's very cute.
Yes, it's very cute.
But so it's in all different places because they had English rights everywhere but the United States and Canada. So you can get it in South Africa, you can get it in New Zealand, you can get it in Australia.
And then eventually, if it'll be translated into other languages,
It has been,
already.
the Italian rights have sold, which is
Congratulations.
so exciting, and
That's
in
exciting.
Japan.
And do they have it's already been
I
translated?
don't know what the Italians have not been very communicative. They're like, yeah, like, well, when is it? Like, well, you've read it. Like, do you need to read it in Italian? We don't know when it's coming out. We'll see.
Well, I'll have to get a copy of the Italian
Yeah.
when it comes out. Any other questions that people have for Christine? Any comments or thoughts?
Thank you so much. I mean, Gina, you pointed out all the humor and charm and everything that was part of Christine's book that makes it a real delight to read. So, thank you.
Congratulations. This is a
Yes,
Thank you so much.
congratulations.
Welcome back.